Awesome. So this is the second edition of Team Pitch Office Hours, which is kind of a meeting where teams can talk about, teams that are hiring within GitLab can talk about cool stuff they're working on, what their plans are, and so we'll be going through some of those. Can also, if there's questions people have about transfer process or how any of that works, maybe at the end too, we can do like a Q&A if there are more specific questions, or you could follow up with me, Sam Goldstein, if you want to talk one-on-one about your specific situation. Christopher had a good comment in the chat. Maybe it'd be good to do a quick round of introductions, since I think we got a pretty small group here. All right, I got everybody now on the array thing. So yeah, I'm introduced myself. I'm Sam Goldstein, Director of Engineering for Ops. Been here at GitLab since January, so a couple months now. Should we just go around, I would maybe call on people? Michael, do you want to tell us a little bit?
Yeah,
quick
sure.
blurb on you.
I'm a senior backend developer on the Meltano team for 2 years, and I've been at GitLab for 2 years and 8 months now. So I'm from Quebec, Canada, and seems like it's still snowing here. So
It's good to get some snow. Awesome. John, how about you next?
Yeah, I'm the Director of Engineering of the Enablement section here in the development team, and I'm located in Portland, Oregon. And I joined the company. I'm almost 1 year here, so almost April 1st, the full day.
And John's planning quite a bit of growth in his group, and some of the enablement stuff, I'll say, seems pretty interesting. So talk more about that. Dow, do you want to go next? Am I saying that right?
You were pretty close. It's Douwe. So yeah, I've been at GitLab for 5 years now. First 4 years I spent them basically inside the GitLab engineering organization, and then the last 6 months I've been at Meltano as engineering lead, and I will also be the only person remaining on the Meltano team after this whole transition has been wrapped up.
Carrying the torch forward. Yeah, I saw that in the group conversation. Yes. Danielle, you want to tell us about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm the general manager for Meltano, so I will also be moving on to another role. I'm a serial startup founder and kind of jack of all trades. Awesome. And I'm in Colorado. It's snowing here as well, Mikhail.
I'm also in
Portland. I'm in Mexico City. It's 77 degrees Fahrenheit and it's beautiful.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah, it's kind of cold where I'm in Portland, Oregon with Chun, I guess. Craig, do you want to give a quick intro?
I am also in Portland, Oregon. So I'm Craig. I'm the engineering manager for the memory and the database teams. Most importantly for this conversation, we'll be talking about the database team position openings that we have. And I have been here for about 10 months, and I worked previously with Chun at Puppet.
Awesome, thanks. How about you next, Derek?
Sure. Yeah, Derek. I'm was a senior front-end engineer on the Meltano team. I very much focus on the UI, UX, and design side of things too. And I'm about probably 6 hours east of Sam, Craig, and Chun. You guys are in Portland. I'm in Moscow, Idaho, so just on the state line border there of Washington and Idaho.
Awesome. How about Christopher?
Hi, I'm Christopher Leffold, Senior Director of Development within the GitLab organization, I guess. I live in San Antonio, Texas, which is not quite as warm as Mexico, but pretty close. It's 21 degrees centigrade here. And my wife was driving 4 hours south, and it was 83 degrees down there right on the border. So great weather. And just want to say, if anybody needs any additional help through this process, don't hesitate to reach out to me, because super important to make sure that folks feel comfortable in movements. I know this is a tough time, and I really want to make sure that we make sure that concerns are addressed and everything else that goes along with that.
Thank you. Yanis, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, I'm Yanis. Yanis is John in Greek. So I live in Greece. It's very sunny here. And I'm a backend engineer, senior engineer in Meltano. And yeah, I've been with GitLab for 2 years. And we've been in since the start of Meltano with Mikhail building there. And yeah.
Excellent. CZ?
Hi, this is CZ. I'm the engineering manager at Global Search team. I've been here about 4 months. I live in Fremont, in California, which is quite close to San Francisco. Yeah, I have been chat with a few of folks here. But still, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Excellent. Eric, you want to jump in?
I have to check because there's so many Erics around here. I'm Eric, and I'm the product manager for the static site editor group. I'm standing in for Jean, who is my EM. I've been here for about 2 months, and I'm in Richmond, Virginia, which is sunny, but not as warm as some of your other southern areas. Yeah, excited to represent the static site editor group. We also work on the handbook, so we have sort of a dual focus. Exciting work.
Awesome. How about Tim?
Yes, I'm director for the dev section. So I'm responsible for manage, plan, and create, and will be representing basically all those jobs today. I'm here in also sunny Vienna, but still a little bit cold in Vienna, Austria. I'm almost 3 years here at GitLab, and yeah.
Awesome. How about Nick?
Sure. Hi, I'm Nick. I am in Minnesota, which is normally cold and snowy this time of year, but not today, so that's kind of nice. And I've been with GitLab for a little over 6 months now. I started with the ecosystem team, and I'm now transitioning into the EM role with the Geo team.
I'll say that sounds like a really interesting project where it's like, as I understand, very business critical in terms of enterprise readiness, and there's a lot of interesting like disaster recovery aspects that. So we'll hear more about that in a little bit. We've got Steve and then Jerome, and then we'll kind of dive into the team information. So Steven.
Hey everyone, I'm Stephen Wilson. I'm the engineering manager for the distribution team. Been at GitLab just about 10, 11 months, I guess, coming up on a year. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, where it's a soggy 66 Fahrenheit. We'll learn more about the distribution team in a bit.
Well, and that brings us to Jerome.
Hey everyone, I'm Jerome. I'm one of the engineering managers on the growth team, specifically representing the acquisition, conversion, and telemetry groups. I'm currently filling in for Bartek, who is our director of engineering on growth. I'm based in Vancouver, Canada. It's about 3 degrees Celsius, which converting to Fahrenheit, like 38, around there.
Awesome. Yeah, I know telemetry is something also that's generally called out as a pretty high priority now within the company. So, all right. So I've got the agenda up. There's some information you can refer to in there. I was just going to do a quick run through kind of, I think the positions we'll be focusing on in this discussion, and then we'll kind of go around and people can just talk a little bit about their teams and why it's interesting to them. So yeah, the enablement group that Chun is in charge of, that's all about, delivering GitLab more effectively to customers. And there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in that space that's pretty critical. Configure team has a one position available, is looking like, due to the way these transfers are working out. So there's we'll talk a little bit about that. Growth telemetry, I know, is a high priority. Verify CI, there's really trying to staff up that team, and some pretty interesting like core functionality. Static site editor, very interesting project. We'll hear about a lot of interest from folks in that. And then the stuff in dev with, there's a bunch of positions, I think, but manage, a lot of it's focused around manage, it seems like. Tim will talk about that. And we'll round it out with the ecosystem and contributor experience. So I guess first, should we jump into the enablement section? Do you want to say something, Chun, and maybe hand it off to other people in the group?
Yeah, I will just give one short introduction. So enablement, if you look at the GitLab application stack, enablement is pretty close to the low-level details. So we have memory team and database team, search team. They're very close to the core services like Elasticsearch, PostgreSQL, and also the performance and memory consumption of the application. And then we have Geo is primarily focusing on replication and disaster recovery. And then the distribution team is all about packaging, deployment, and the configuration. So managers will share more detail, but we are pretty low according to the stack. I mean, low-level details. Yeah, that's it. So,
Greg, do you want to?
Yeah.
Do you want to jump in and we can also, put the order in the agenda, but I guess we'll just kind of maybe wing it. But yeah, how about you, Craig?
Sure. So I'm running the database team. It's a good mix of Ruby on Rails development and PostgreSQL development. As of October last year, we only had one database maintainer. So there's been a big effort and push to get more database maintainers and kind of spread the wealth. We are up to 4 or 5 as of today. So we've gotten more of the development community within GitLab to be more involved. So that's been huge. Our goals coming up for the coming quarters, we have partitioning we need to implement to, mostly that will impact user experience. It will bring back data a lot faster. It should provide some performance improvements as well. We're upgrading on production, everywhere. PostgreSQL is going to be upgraded from 9.6 to 11.7. We've been behind for a little while, and we will be able to consume a lot of the performance improvements of PostgreSQL in the later versions. There will be consulting and guidance across teams. So once we do this team does the first implementation of partitioning, then we'll document and be able to enable other teams to do their own partitioning to actually get some of those performance improvements. And then the next big ticket item is we're working on sharding, which builds on top of partitioning. And sharding will help with our availability, scalability, all those things. So we're less like a feature team and more back end, as Chun kind of described. So got some important and exciting things to be working on over the next several milestones. So that's it for me. Looks like distribution is next. Stephen?
Thanks, Greg. Distribution team is a relative, I'd say it's a more seasoned team. We've got a mix of senior engineers. About half the team are maintainers and the other half are intermediates. So we have a nice pairing model that we use typically on our team. I think I'll dive right into those bullets there that automate the deployment of large-scale architectures that include HA availability and Geo. One of the newer projects that we're working on is something called GitLab Orchestrator. We've noticed from product and other sources that there's a variety of tooling that folks use to deploy GitLab at scale. And so we're trying to sort of rein that in and come up with a standard that allows us to deploy and manage customer instances in a consistent way. With Cloud Native install from viable to lovable. We've been using Helm charts. They've been GA for quite a while, but they're not entirely as lovable as Omnibus. There's limits in the application that are being worked on. For instance, pages requires shared storage. Once that happens, the next step will be for us to be able to deploy pages into a Kubernetes environment using some sort of an object store. There's other things that are happening in our Cloud Native charts. Helm 3 is reasonably new. One of the negative things about our charts is they're very complex. And one of the things we'd like to do in the coming year is leverage Helm 3's libraries and other optimizations to make the chart a little bit easier to manage. Next one, enhance the install, upgrade, and next steps experience. Pretty self-explanatory. Like, it's one thing to get GitLab installed once. It's another to have lots and lots of users on it and have to keep it current. One of the things that the team really prides ourselves on is that a seamless upgrade experience between both minor and major versions. We're wanting to continue that. Obviously, that's a big part of the success of the team is keeping customers current. And update major components. This is one Craig alluded to as well, right? Postgres 11 is a great example of before other teams can begin to use it, it has to be packaged up into our omnibus deployments along with our Helm support. So you can think of the team, I joke sometimes it's distribution team, but you could easily call us the dependency team at times because of the way that we're sort of in line to either add new components or update them, oftentimes because of other team requests. So that kind of rounds it out. I will pass it over to Nick to talk about Geo.
Sure. Yeah, so Geo provides the ability to set up a secondary read-only node, and that kind of forms the core of not only like geo replication functionality, but also disaster recovery and also potential backup and restore functionality. And so all of those are at varying stages of maturity, but they're all sort of at the like minimal or viable level. So there's a lot of work to be done to get the Geo solution up to more complete and level of maturity, and a lot of that revolves around just like making things easier to set up. It's quite an involved installation, and also making the certain processes like the failover process a lot friendlier, and also making it a little more the experience of using the secondary node just a lot more seamless and sort of I guess not quite as apparent. So the Geo team is 6 back-end engineers and 1 front-end engineer. It's also a pretty mature team. I think most of the engineers on Geo have been with GitLab for at least a couple of years. We have, I think, 4 GitLab, core GitLab maintainers on the team. So that's one reason I'm excited to move in the Geo team is just to get the chance to work with a team that has so much experience in the company. And yeah, I think a couple of the big items that we're working on now. One is a big part of enterprise readiness, and that's and dog fooding, which is rolling out Geo on staging, and then eventually possibly rolling it out for .com. And another really cool item that Geo is working on is a self-service framework for engineers to be empowered to add Geo support for new data types versus the previous model where oftentimes new data types would be introduced to the code base, and then Geo would kind of have to follow up and add support for those. So yeah, those are a couple interesting items that are currently being worked on. Happy to answer any questions for anyone who's interested. Thanks.
Awesome. And CZ, you want to give us a quick blurb on search?
Yes. So yeah, the search team, we mainly use the Elasticsearch backend to provide the search functionality to our users. We need engineers with strong Ruby on Rails and also the Elasticsearch experience. And also in order to increase the performance, we have moved part of the functionality of our Ruby on Rails application and wrapped into a Golang-based indexer. So the Go experience is also desirable for the team. So right now, we are rolling out the feature to our customers on GitLab.com. So that's our recent focus. We have been facing a lot of operational challenges recently, so which required us to work on a lot of things to improve and stabilize our search pipeline. That's also been a recent effort. And we will be working on some other very challenging features like reducing the index size and and implement zero downtime reindexing, and also to improve the search performance. Just to give some example, right now, we hope we could enable the Elastic search-based search functionality to all our GitLab.com user, but we cannot because the cost is quite high. So it's quite challenging and very important for us to find ways to manage the index size increase. And also there are a lot of discussions have been around about the search results relevancy and also about the more code search functionalities. So yeah, I see a lot of challenging work and very interesting. So the team right now, we have 2 backend engineers, and we have 1 more joining us at the end of the month. And for the team, we have 1 B opening and 1 IFE, but just for the transparency, we are evaluating our future roadmap and the workloads to see whether we'll hire the IFE front-end engineer now or later, or even convert into the backend engineer. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for that. This one is the configure team that Nicholas Click manages. He can't be here today, so I'm gonna read through this. This is a full stack, or possibly front-end engineering position on the configure team. Configure is focused on features that integrate with things like Kubernetes, Terraform, automate infrastructure on major cloud providers. So it's an opportunity there to dive into those technologies. If you have an interest in kind of operations, cloud native, and can do a kind of full stack type role, this could be a good position for you. So yeah, you can talk to Nick more about that if you're interested, or I can answer questions about it. Hand it off now to growth. So that's I think you, Jerome. I talk about telemetry and what you're doing there.
Hey everyone. So we're responsible for collecting product usage data across GitLab. We've got this really interesting problem of trying to do growth while respecting our users' privacy. So this includes how do you do tracking and how do you do experimentation on both GitLab.com, where we've got access to data, and then on self-managed, where we actually aren't plugged into someone's database. I think we all are users of GitLab, and we sort of understand, what our users are and aren't comfortable with. So that's the tricky part, which we're navigating right now. It's a similar sort of space which you all were working on before, where it has to do with product analytics and product usage. One of our big goals for the growth team this year is to move towards rapid experimentation across the entire funnel. So if you look at the funnel right now, someone lands on about.gitlab.com on the pricing page, and then ends up on GitLab itself to create an account, and then eventually ends up on the customer's application to actually make a purchase. We're trying to do collection and experimentation across all of those domains and all of those different applications, which is a tricky problem to solve. We're currently using usage ping and snowplow to collect a lot of this data, but we're looking at ways which we can improve it because they are in their early stages. We have 2 open roles. One is for the front end and one is for the back end. And we're specifically looking for people with strong product analytics backgrounds. Our team is small right now. We've got 1 dedicated backend engineer, and we've been borrowing engineers across the growth team just to reach, hit some of the company goals. Across growth, we've got about 16 engineers that work with us.
Awesome. Really important stuff, and I think it's I know for me, if I had more information about like which features were being used, that would be very informative to a lot of decisions. Next group is Verify, which I think Darby couldn't be here. Christopher, do you want to talk about CI and kind of how core and important that is, or would you rather me pitch it?
I can do that. Just give me a quick second. This is what happens when I'm trying to look at something else real quick. Yeah, so CI is obviously a cornerstone of our product. It's one of the pillars, big pillars, right, from the perspective of things that we're doing. In particular, the Verify continuous integration team is really challenged this year with trying to figure out how we basically up our enterprise sales. So the way you up your enterprise sales is you essentially onboard large quantities of data. So like a lot of our customers already have CI systems in Jenkins as an example, and we're doing a Jenkins importer project as an example where we're attempting to bring in customers who are running currently on Jenkins in as seamless of a fashion as possible. We don't want to emulate Jenkins fully, obviously, because we have our own special sauce that we have as part of this product, but we do want to give them a good experience in the transition associated with it. This team is primarily, I believe, doing most of its work in Go at this point, related to some of the work they're doing. You know, the milestones are extremely full of variety as far as the work items that you potentially could consider associated with it. Is that what you're looking for, Sam?
Yeah, that's perfect, Christopher.
Cool.
Thank you. And yeah, I know they're going from like 5 engineers to 10. I think it's an area that's really being invested in. And you know, my understanding, I mean, just to echo Christopher, is that you know, something very core to GitLab. It's very important. They've got a lot on their plate, and so it's you know, it's a great place to make an impact if you're interested in that kind of
just to
stuff.
highlight that, thanks for reminding me, we're doubling down there, and this is a good example where you know, originally product management was thinking 8 people, and we've got the Jenkins importer in there, and I said no, we're going to have 10. It just makes a lot of sense just for the complexity. So if you're looking for a complex and interesting problem, this is a good area to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I think that next we're going to segue into the static site editor, which I think has at least one position left open. I know there are a couple folks that recently kind of transferred through this process into that group or in the middle of that. But Eric, you want to tell us about the cool stuff that's going on there?
Yeah, glad to. I don't know exactly what I'd have to defer to Jean and the rest of the engineering team about how many we actually have open. Last I heard, we had 1 front end, 1 back end. But I'll tell you a little bit more of the group's goals. As I mentioned before, we kind of have a dual purpose. We were sort of born from the need to improve our editing experience on the handbook, to lower the bar and the barrier for contribution of content to a static site, which is what the handbook is. In this case, the handbook uses middleman, but the goal of the static site editor group is to bring that value that we build for the handbook to all GitLab users, or any of the GitLab users that are generating static sites from various static site generators. So we want to be a little more general and offer a really delightful editing experience. And the great opportunity is now we don't really know what that is yet. We're still learning. We're just starting up. I've been here for 2 months. The group's only existed since I think October, November. And we're still defining that longer term vision while iterating on like immediate improvements to the handbook. We do maintain sort of the technical side of the handbook as well. So we work a lot on improvements to the build pipeline and the middleman project itself. There's other exciting competitors and peers in this space. The Jamstack movement is a very exciting area. I think GitLab is positioned really well to bring a powerful and flexible solution to the market, whether that's adopting various other projects and bringing them into our product, or building our own, or a combination of the two. I think there's some interesting challenges that we have to solve, like tracking changes in generated static production HTML files back to source files, and working with structured data in a visual way, things like JSON and CSV, how that gets represented to users in a way that's more user-friendly and easier to edit. And then a lot of challenges around performance, and live editing is a big part of the experience we're going for, either in-page or side-by-side live preview. We're not quite sure what's going to be the right answer, but performance is going to be top of mind for anybody working on this group. And we get to work on components that are going to be used across multiple teams on GitLab. We're already talking about using similar components in the editor with the knowledge and wiki group, the web IDE. Obviously, we'll be working with pages and potentially bringing these improvements into review apps down the road. So there's going to be a lot of cross-stage collaboration and a lot of a really important work going on. I think, yeah, for the front end, we're really looking for really strong JavaScript experience and ideally some experience with the Jamstack or static site generators. And then on back end, we're Ruby on Rails, and love to find somebody open to working in other languages though, because as the listing Jean mentioned, we might be building some plugins in Go or Python, depending on the platform that we're trying to target.
Excellent. So I think next let's segue to you, Tim, and maybe tell us about the managed stuff and all the, well, just all the stuff you got going on in dev.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, Eric, great summary also of the technical part for static site editor, as Sean is not here today. Yeah, I can really emphasize it's a really interesting area. We have one of the most complex view applications in GitLab is the web IDE, and a lot of that stuff will be housed in there. So that very interesting topic. And on the other hand, we have a lot around Jamstack and especially going also into the handbook. So it will be a really nice and interesting mix for a couple of different areas, greenfield starting, rebuilding stuff, but also building super new stuff. Overall, yeah, dev is having a couple of open positions at the moment, or at least in the next year. Manage is our biggest focus point. So manage is everything from the start of our life cycle. So it's housing quite different areas. Currently, the main things that we are staffing in the year are, on one hand, access and spaces. So access and spaces are all around user management, group management. Also, we are more and more diving into the area of having the representation of teams in GitLab so that we can build dashboards around what the team is doing and what they will be basically as a starting point, so that we are also able to emphasize more how teams actually work and not have those, oh, there's a group and those a bunch of people. There's also a lot of enterprise stuff in Manage already in access and spaces all around single sign-ons and the different standards there. The other big part is definitely compliance. So this is all going into logging, auditing, and all the different topics of also getting a lot of stuff ready for the big enterprises. So also quite interesting things going on there, especially if we are interested in also a little bit of legal stuff. Then we have, which is not listed directly here, we are also looking for Plan Certify. Plan Certify is everything around requirements management. So really working in the project management area, but with a really different outlook all around, especially those requirements topics and building something new for, again, big enterprises. Again, that's the pattern here, looking at the different area. The main front-end engineers that we are currently looking for is one in manage compliance and one in create static site editor, as we are speaking right now. The rest is really classic backend engineering in GitLab with Rails. So that's the main focus point there. Then we have a complete new team, which is currently built and is combining a lot of different topics, in reality 4 different topics, which is the ecosystem and contributor experience team, which maybe at some point we will find even a better name. But it's combining everything that Nick has done so far with his team on the ecosystem side, so really integrating with other products, Jira, classic one, And there are also a couple on the roadmap where we want to integrate GitLab nicely into it. So that's also, I think, a really interesting part to connect with other solutions, also sometimes other languages, and looking at different topics there. And on the other hand, we have contributor experience, which is also housing everything that we want to drive forward in the sense of improving simply the experience for every contributor, the speed, especially, and the performance of being able to contribute internally and externally, but really with the main focus internally. So one of the big focuses is the GDK. So really improving the GDK, making it faster, making it more stable, making it more productive. So mocking is a huge topic, most probably soon, and also how to get to a state that you are basically able to develop the stuff inside GitLab. So those are really the focus points there. And the other part is everything around pajamas and GitLab UI. So the component libraries, that's more of the front-end area that we are looking into, is really improving that part so that front-end engineers have a really nice and smooth pipeline so that they can simply pick components and build stuff. And we have also unified on design and things like that there. Yeah, a lot of options there. Please feel free to ask questions.
I think that's our next stop is Q&A. So yeah, thanks everybody for talking about all the interesting stuff you're doing. People, we can do it in the agenda, or you can just shout it out and I'll try to take notes. Anyone have any questions for anyone in the group?
It was really clear, actually. Like everybody was on top of their presentation game, right?
Very polished, yeah, I have to say. Good job, everyone.
I was going to say, as a side, this is a lot of great information. I'm trying to figure out how to politely say that we should get this all in the handbook, and I don't have a polite way to say it. So we should probably get everybody engineering manager who thought about this, they should be thinking about like maybe this is something we should put in our sections. Like these are the challenges this group has from that perspective, because it feels like we have a lot of good content in here that I'm guessing we don't have in our group pages right now.
But to that point, I want to give kudos to Steve and the PM, Larissa, for the distribution team particularly. They work together to polish that, and a very good high levels, summary of what the team is, what the team does. So that's close to a formal documentation.
Yeah, maybe as a low level of shame, if you just cut and paste it in to your page as an MR, that's a good iteration, right? Is just get the content in.
Absolutely.
I've reached out to a few of you, and I'll probably have some follow-up questions kind of after this. But I did have one question for you, Tim, with respect to the managed compliance front-end role. You mentioned and I looked at this briefly, but the design systems one was one of the pieces that personally stuck out to me. I was curious if you could speak to any of the other UI portions of that role. What else would be encapsulated in that role? And if there's an actual link to the role or something too, I could obviously just check that out, but I have not seen that yet personally. So, and you're on mute.
Classic rookie mistake. Muted. You mean the contributor experience role or the compliance role?
The compliance role, unless I'm misinterpreting that. I believe that's the one that was associated with the design systems work.
No, the contributor experience team is the one around design system. There we have a very clear focus for the front-end engineers, mainly around the design system and getting our design system fully implemented. So currently it can simply happen, or what happened in the workflow was, okay, there is a new component that design is suggesting that we want to have, and in reality 3 different teams need it. And one team was like, okay, I'm picking this, I'm doing this. And then for whatever reason, it took longer, or they were blocked in that sense. What happened is that the other 2 teams were especially really had a dependency on it and were blocked. And that's what we are trying to simply reduce by having dedicated front-end engineers to work really on the most important components so that we are not hitting roadblocks there. But the bigger topic is also we have by now already like 40 components implemented. but they are not completely following the design guidelines. So they are, sometimes it's just a couple of pixels missing on the padding, and sometimes it's a bigger thing. But what we want to get is really get, on one hand, components implemented, get them correctly styled, and then in the third step, it's really, but this is then also more of the work with the product teams, and their responsibility is to get it also into the product and especially replace everything that we have already in there, which is then the third part. And as soon as all those 3 steps are done, then we have a green check mark on a component. That's where we want to get to. The other parts for a front-end engineer in the contributor experience team are also working with the GDK team or working against GDK for example, improving the Webpack pipelines. So really deep down technical stuff there. And on the other hand, also, of course, the whole ecosystem stuff around building integrations, building front ends for that, if they are needed in their product, or if we need to add something to our product to make them successful. So it's a good mix. We will have most probably some focus for some specific people that they have simply a higher insight into a specific topic, but we will also mix it around. And yeah, we have to. With that many topics for one team, it will be a good sharing of very different topics.
Sure, cool. Yeah, thank you very much.
Sure.
We just have a few minutes left, I think, in the scheduled time. I thought maybe it would be useful for me to just go briefly through kind of what the transfer process looks like here at GitLab for anybody who's not familiar with that. So here in the agenda, here, I'll share my screen here. You can see this is just the general process where you can read about transfers, and this can happen anytime. This is just an example of a team has a position open. Anyone internally is free to apply for that, and generally, kind of that's the guidelines that we're following here. In the case where there's a kind of reassignment, which is kind of the case here, and we've had some other examples of that. In the company recently, one thing that we try to really make sure we're doing is following all of the local labor laws. So there is, as a result of that, some kind of process and making sure that we're, building all the right documentation around this. So that's something that, in general, you won't have to deal with, but it's something that, I've been working with our people business partner around. In general, kind of the way the process would work is that you've gotten some information now about kind of what positions are available. It'd be anything that you're interested in. It'd be good to reach out to the hiring manager for that position. If you're not sure who that is, you can ask me, and I can track that down for you. And then if you, determine, yeah, it feels like this is a, good match for something I'd be interested in and, would be set up to do well in, then, that's kind of the next step in moving that process forward. So, a lot of it is about you trying to figure out what you're interested in, where you feel like you have the biggest impact. We'll do something fulfilling. We are very also focused on making sure there's a good outcome for everybody in this process. So, one of the goals is that everybody ends up, in a position that is really exciting and that they're happy about. So, some of that we try to handle case by case, but yeah, it's definitely a big part of the goal there.
I have one small question. There's a,
Yeah.
At the end of the document, the agenda, there's a scalability 2 team that, and also, So is there any information about who to contact, or is it the same manager that's scalability 1?
Yeah, I'd say it's generally the same process. Those positions report into the infrastructure group, which is part of engineering, but more focused on SRE kind of around the .com site. So Christopher, do you know who the hiring manager would be for those roles?
I think he's actually hired somebody, but they may have just started. So Marin would be the person I'd start with to engage. That one's a little different in regards to most of the positions we're thinking in terms of the role doesn't change, right? Your current position and role doesn't change. And if you move to infrastructure, depending on which position it is, it could be actually a role change, because we do have SREs as an example. And I think the scalability team is primarily made up of folks with SRE talent, though Craig may correct me on that from that perspective.
That is correct. It's mostly
Okay.
SRE talent, and Marin is the right person to talk to.
Yeah, so in that case, I don't want to speak for Marin, but it may be a little more like generally lateral transfers, no interviewing. Do you want to work on this team? Does it look like it's a good fit? Manager agrees and accepts, and very short circuited. Role changes sometimes it's not an official process, but Marin may say, okay, well, I'd like to actually go through more of a formal interview process. So just be aware of that aspect of it. That shouldn't preclude you from exploring that, to be very clear on that point. Just more of, it'll be a little bit different depending on what Marin chooses to do.
So just to further clarify on what you just said, Christopher, so for internal transfers, if any of the engineers here on this call reach out to me and we agree, hey, this is a good move, what do we do next?
So the next step, let me know that, and I've got a place where I'm tracking that and working with Rose and people ops to make sure that we have, all the proper documentation, et cetera. But yeah, after you've had that conversation, if that's kind of the outcome of it, just let me know.
Okay.
And it really comes around the legal laws for localities. So that's what we're trying to make sure of. In the US, as an example, if you're an engineer and you move positions, they don't have those restrictions, but other countries, even if you change the comma, whatever group you're assigned to, literally it's a contractual change.
Thank you.
I'll do a last check, see if there's any other questions in the doc.
I guess a quick question. How's everyone on the Meltano team doing? I know it's obviously it's a big change. Just curious how everyone's doing.
I mean, I'm doing all right, I guess. It's just the reality of the situation. Obviously, I'm a little bit, I guess, with respect to odds in terms of the open positions from a front end perspective, there's a little bit less opportunities. Like I said, I kind of reached out to a few folks, and there's one specifically that I'm very interested in, but again, there's no guarantees, so who knows what's going to happen. But we'll see. But it's understandable. We weren't executing as well as we would have ideally liked to do. So.
Yeah, it was kind of a tough week. At least for me, this was one of the best teams I have ever worked for. So, and everybody in the team, yeah, it was great. So it's always very, very difficult, to wrap a project and move on. But yeah, part of what we are doing, and yeah, heads down and move forward.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo that. I mean, it's been a wild ride. So we explored a lot of things. And also one of the things that we explored is like building a startup within the startup, which is its own like ecosystem, right? It's its own like thing that does not exist that much. So we learned a lot, I think, and hopefully it's not all going to be lost. Well, personally, it's not going to be lost for sure, but I mean, as for the company, other than that, I'm just like, you have to move on. Like the show must go on, right?
Yeah, as for me, the situation is a little bit different because I'm not leaving Meltano team, but instead I will be the Meltano team. But yeah, I've really appreciated the last 6 months that I've gotten to work with the rest of this team, and I feel a certain amount of responsibility to not have their work, completely kind of die and go to waste now. So I really am motivated to see this through a little while longer. But obviously, it's going to be a completely different deal by myself than with the team, and I'll keep reaching out to them occasionally with questions related to their little parts of the code base. But one day at a time, different. Oh, so for me, it's a very different reality, but we'll figure out what it'll look like.
Yeah, we're a really small team, so it's just kind of weird going from this little thing that was off to the side to like learning the GitLab org. I don't know if the rest of the team feels this, but I've been just trying to learn like what is everything and what do all the groups do, and just it's kind of the information fire hose that you get when you start a new job, but like you're already in the company and now you're experiencing the fire hose, so it's just a lot of kind of learning to navigate. But this has been super helpful. I totally agree this content should go on the group pages, because this gave me a lot of insight into what's kind of the nitty gritty, like needed things, which I think is really helpful. So, but yeah, no, personally just like adjusting to not hanging out with these guys every day will be interesting. But yeah, I'm kind of excited now that I hear about all the opportunities. I hear lots of things that seem to match up with what they're great at. So I'm very optimistic.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I think there's definitely a lot of cool stuff going on, and just in terms of other individuals that have kind of had this type of process, gone through it recently. Obviously, there's some constraints in terms of like what roles are available, but in general, it seems like everybody's been really able to find something that is really interesting to them, that they're excited, where they can have a big impact. So it's been nice to see that. Hopefully, that will continue here. All right. Well, we're a little over time, but I think it was good. Good to get through all that. Thanks for everybody for participating. I will put the video up, and I'll mention it on that issue that's linked in the agenda, so you can follow it there, and may try to get some more of this like into the handbook also, if this is something we're going to be doing regularly. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cutter.
Thank you.